Hello, everyone. As you come in, you're going to come in muted and your cameras are off. We will ask you to remain muted. If you would like to turn your camera on, you're welcome to. But if you can remain muted during the presentation, and we will have questions and answer at the end, and we'll get started in just a few minutes. We're going to wait for a few more people to join us. Hi, everyone. If you're just joining us, we're going to give it a few minutes as people kind of make their way into the Zoom meeting, and we'll get started in a few minutes here. You come in and you'll be automatically muted and your cameras will be off. You're welcome to turn your camera on if you'd like to, but we do ask that you remain muted for now. There will be a question and answer at the end of the presentation. Okay. Looks like we've kind of come to a lull of people joining. So Bob, I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation and share my screen. So if you can keep an eye on that waiting room, if you can admit people in as they show up there.
Yep, will do.
All right. Let me get. This. All right, can everybody see, can you guys see my screen? You can, okay, great. I'm going to pin those of us giving the presentation here. All right. Well, welcome everybody. I'm going to go ahead and get this started, and as others trickle in, they will be able to follow along with us. If you didn't hear as you came in, this meeting is right now being recorded. So we will put this presentation up on both the Landmark Society's website for this project, and then the Highland Park Neighborhood Association will also have it. We're hoping some of the other neighborhoods that have been involved in these projects, if they would like to put it up on their websites, they can also do that. So this meeting is being recorded and you'll be able to watch it again later. First, I'd like to welcome everybody tonight. My name is Megan Clem. I'm with the Landmark Society of Western New York. We were the preservation consultant on these projects. We're going to be talking tonight about 3 different historic district nominations that were done, and we've got Virginia and Christina from the State Preservation Office here to talk to you about what a National Register nomination is and the benefits of the nomination. And then Christina will talk to you about the Historic Homeownership Tax Credit Program and how you can make use of that benefit now that you will soon be officially listed on the National Register. Just a quick who's who in this project that took place. So the sponsor association was the Highland Park Neighborhood Association, who is now a 501c3. That took place during this process. They became a 501c3. And they had some support from the Highland Park Conservancy and other area and neighborhood representatives. And they also had some grant funding through the Preservation League of New York State through their Preserve New York grant program and the Community Foundation. There's also the Landmark Society of Western New York. That's who I represent. We were your preservation consultants right in your own neighborhood. We are headquartered at Warner Castle. If you have not already seen it, although I'm assuming that's where you went to register for this presentation, if you go to www.landmarksociety.org/Highland, that's where you can see more information about the project. You can see the boundaries for each of the districts and find out a little bit more information there. Then we have the New York State Historic Preservation Office, or the New York SHPO. They are part of the New York State Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation Office. They administer the state and national registers of historic places, which is what the project was. They also administer the historic tax credit program you'll be hearing about. And then there's also the National Park Service. They administer the National Register of Historic Places where your districts will ultimately be listed. Just to quickly run through, although Virginia is going to go over this later, we did do 3 districts. One was an update and a boundary amendment for the pre-existing 1978 listed Mount Hope Highland Historic District. You can see the new boundary here, with the caveat of the fact that Mount Hope Cemetery was removed from the boundary because it has more recently been listed on its own in the National Register. So we did remove that from the boundary of the district, although it is still listed. Then one of our new districts is the Ellwanger and Barry Highland Park Historic District. You can see the boundary here for that district. And again, you'll see these later in Virginia's presentation. And then finally, the third new district is the Azalea Highland Park Terrace Historic District, which is the neighborhood just south of Highland Park. Okay, with that, I just want to let you know, again, this is being recorded, so we'll have these up on our various websites for you to watch again later or to share with your neighbors who weren't able to be here. I do want to kick it over to Bob quickly to say a few words.
Thanks, Megan. My name is Bob Thompson. I'm the chair of the Highland Park Neighborhood Association currently, and I'd like to give you just a little bit of background information. HPNA has been quiet pretty much through the pandemic, but behind the scenes, this is probably the biggest project that this neighborhood association has ever done, with the intent to make it a long-term benefit to the folks that live here in the district. There isn't generally too much fanfare when it comes to initiating historic districts, but this is really an important asset that we can use to maintain the housing stock quality of the neighborhood that we live in. This project overall is right at price tagged at about $30,000, so it certainly isn't significant. Fortunately, it's all been paid for either through grants or some of the funding that HPNA had available in its own treasury. So I'm happy to say we're not carrying any debt for this. And I think that overall, it'll be a great benefit to the neighborhoods going forward, particularly with the tax credits that are available. So that's about all that I have to say. I'll turn it back to you, Meg.
Great. Well, I'm very excited about this. For those of you who don't know, these districts and their significance pretty much revolve around community planning and development with the Ellwanger and Barry Nursery and then their realty company, and also for its association with some pretty prolific architects that were in the Rochester area during the time, such as A.J. Warner and his son J. Foster Warner, Gervais Wheeler, Claude Bragdon, and A.J. Davis are a few of them. And also for landscape architecture, as you know, Highland Park is part of the Mount Hope Highland Historic District, which was designed by the very famed Frederick Law Olmsted, and then some other various landscape design throughout the districts by another prolific Rochester-based landscape architect by Alling DeForest. He designed things such as the Sunken Garden at Warner Castle. So just to give you a little taste about why we listed these and what is so special about them. And with that, I am going to kick things over to Virginia.
Thank you. Okay. Before we get into this, well, I should say that as an introduction to my presentation here, it helps for us to give a little bit of background as to what the State Historic Preservation Office is. But the gist of this program is just like the title says, that listings on the National Register of Historic Places. This is basic information for property owners. And as you can see, we have a house here that's listed in a recent historic district, the Crossman Terrace Historic District. Next slide, please. Or did you share your screen? No.
Sorry, it's not moving forward.
Oh. It was a minute ago.
It sure was. Let's see.
Yeah, there we go. Okay.
All right.
Just a little bit of boring background here. The whole reason why we're here is because of the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966, which created the National Register of Historic Places. And like any federal program, it's created by Congress, it's created by the federal government, and then it's handed off to the states to administer. Hence, that's how we get the State Historic Preservation Office. Now, it started out as a Historic Preservation Officer, but it turned out to be too much for one particular person to actually do, so it morphed into the State Historic Preservation Office. And as you can see here, it says, since 1968, charged with identifying, evaluating, registering, and protecting historic properties, working in partnership with organizations, individuals, and government agencies. There is also a New York State law, which is fairly similar to the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966, and that's the State Historic Preservation Law of 1980. And what that did was create the State Historic Preservation, or the State Register of Historic Places, which is important if you belong to a 501c3 or a not-for-profit organization and you're going for state fundings. That factors into it. And also too, with the tax credit program, the homeowner tax credit program, it means we only have to be listed on the state register. But my philosophy is, why are you going to stop at the state register? Go for the whole thing. Okay, next slide, please. And people often ask, well, you know, what is this? Well, I don't think they even ask. They just assume that we are kind of like the preservation police. No, that's not what we do. This is what we do. We work with communities on surveys of historic resources. We administer another program called the Certified Local Government Program. Rochester is a certified local government, and that means that there is local historic preservation legislation that is, and there's an active historic preservation commission within the city of Rochester. What these certified local governments do is they kind of like look after what's going on in their community. We also administer the tax credit programs. Right now we administer, I think, 3 of them. I'll go into those a little later. Of course, what we're here today for is the State and National Register of Historic Places. And the other thing we do too is connect with other groups, public and private preservation groups like the Landmark Society, to work to do, well, if you go to the next slide. We'd like to work with communities to take things like this and turn them into, get it in. Whoop. It should have changed into a beautiful, gorgeous house in Jamesport. But anyway, listing things on the State and National Register of Historic Places, there's a lot of, I don't want to say rumors, but a confusion out there about what you can and cannot get listed on the National Register. And I keep saying to people, if you can make a case for it that the National Park Service will buy, we can get it listed. In some cases in point are some unusual things like the Canastilla Living Sign, which is made up of pine trees, which we got listed in 2004. The Big Duck and Big Duck Ranch in Flanders. There's a wonderful duck that we got listed, well, first in 1997 and then again in 2008. Duck came first and then the Big Duck Ranch. Next slide, please. Some people think that you can't get churches listed or cemeteries. And here are 2 beautiful cases right in Rochester of things that we were able to get listed on the National Register. The First Unitarian Church in 2014, and like Megan said, Mount Hope Cemetery, which was very recent. Okay, next slide. Now, one of the tax credit programs that we administer is a federal program which is geared for commercial properties, commercial, industrial, agricultural, or rental residential properties. These have to be well, what we do is we certify them as historic structures. They eventually do have to get listed on the National Register of Historic Places, which means you can start out by being eligible to get listed. But eventually, somewhere along the line, you have to get listed. It's a 3-part process, and after you get your your final approval, then the clock starts ticking if you're not yet listed on the National Register. But usually, we try and get things listed before the project is done. And 2 examples of things that we got listed that are tax credit programs are the Hickey Freeman Clothing Company and the L. Wanger and Berry Building in the Four Corners area. Okay. And I do like to mention, if you have a commercial building that you're thinking of something project to do, properties that are in qualifying census tracts can get an additional New York State credit, depending on, and the size of the credit is dependent on size of the project. Next slide, please. This is the one that probably most of the audience will be interested in, and that's the homeowner, the residential program, the New York State Homeowner Tax Credit Program. It's for private owner-occupied residences, and as you can see, if you back up one, as you can see, it's 20% of the eligible rehabilitation expenditures. You must be located in a qualifying census tract, and you must be at least listed in the process of being listed on the state register, which the 3 historic districts that we're dealing with today are in that process. And if you're wondering if you are in a qualifying census tract, currently all of the city of Rochester is in a qualifying census tract. So if you're in the city, you're fine. If you're a toe over like in Brighton or Arundequoit, no, that won't work. But yes. Rochester is a qualifying census tract. Next. And the other one that we have, which since a lot of you are mostly urban people, but you may have a barn on your property. We do have a New York State Barn Rehabilitation Tax Credit Program. And it's a state income tax credit that's equal to 25% of the rehabilitation expenditures. The barn must be owned by a New York State taxpayer. The barn does not have to be listed on the state or federal or national register of historic places, but the barn must have been constructed prior to 1946 and be used for agricultural purposes. And the rehabilitation project must not, like it says here, must not alter or change the historic appearance. And you cannot convert your wonderful little barn into a residence. It has to be a barn. Next, please. Okay. Now, districts, that's what we're here to talk about tonight. What is a district? A district possesses a significant concentration linkage. Let me put it in plain English. This is right out of the National Park Service regulations. Basically, the houses have to be historic. They have to share a history. And it says aesthetically by plan or physical development. And if you look here, this is Arvine Heights, which is in the 19th Ward. That street is a historic district. And you can see there's some similarities. And the similarities are there because a lot of the buildings were built around the same time. We're talking about developments here, especially in the city of Rochester. Some of the developments might have started and then stopped and then picked up again. But they all do share a same aesthetic. They all share a same history. Okay, next. Now for the historic districts that we're talking about tonight, I wanted to give you all a heads up that you will be getting in the mail a letter from our office, which is kind of odd language, but we can't do anything about it because it's what the National Park Service requires us to say and to do. What it'll do is it'll say, hey, your house is being listed on the National Register, when it really should say your house is being included in a historic district, which is being listed on the National Register. You're going to get 3 of these letters. The first one will say it's going to go to the State Review Board. There's a State Board for Historic Preservation that reviews all these nominations. They meet 4 times a year. This one is going to the September quarterly meeting. I should say all 3 of the districts are going at that time. So if you're a homeowner, you should be getting this letter. And the one thing it will do, if you have questions about it, we do try and include this this frequently asked questions, this FAQ sheet, which if you read through it and if you still have questions, please contact me. I will try and answer them as best I can. Next. Okay, the districts that we are talking about tonight are 3 wonderful districts. One is the Azalea Highland Terrace Historic District. A lot of these, like Megan said, have connection to the Ellwanger and Berry. A lot of people think, oh, Ellwanger and Berry, weren't they a big nursery? Well, yeah, they were. But somewhere along the line, they realized that the land that the nursery was on was worth more than the nursery itself. So they started going into real estate development. And the three districts that we have today all share that history. Azalea is the last one to be developed. And this one, people may look around and go, well, there's a lot of like 1950s and 1960s ranches in there. Well, yeah, that Ellwanger and Berry business was in business for a very long time, all the way through the 1960s. And that's why you have a lot of buildings within this historic district that may go up to 1970. So this is probably the youngest historic district that we've been working on in this section of Rochester. The other one, you can see that if you follow the green arrow, the next one is the Mount Hope Highland Historic District, which has already been listed. But what we're doing is we're changing the boundaries. You see the red squares there. Those are areas that we are adding, residential areas that we are adding, plus more. Not all of Highland Park got included in this nomination. So we're expanding it to include Highland Park, which makes more sense. And as Megan said, we are taking out Mount Hope Cemetery. And that's because, well, a couple of reasons. One is when it got listed with the Mount Hope Highland Historic District, only half of the cemetery got listed. Okay. Later on, the city contacted us saying, you know, we'd like to get the whole cemetery listed, which we did. It's listed, it's a very important cemetery. It's listed at the state level of history. There are 3 levels: local level, state, and then national. And this one, because it was one of the first rural cemeteries in the state of New York, that's why it's listed at the state level. Okay. So we're taking that out because the whole cemetery is listed. And because we're focusing more on the residential and Highland Park, it lost what we call the National Park Service calls association, feeling and association. It's a weird amorphous terms, but what it means is, you know, this new district boundary that we're proposing here, it kind of like turns its back on Mount Hope Cemetery, okay, even though it's right across the street, because we're focusing on Highland Park and the residences around it, and we're adding more residences to it. So that was kind of a long way of saying, well, we're changing the boundary and cutting Mount Hope Cemetery, but don't worry, it's still listed, okay, and it will be listed. That won't change, okay. And the next slide will show the Highland Park, Ellwanger and Berry Highland Park Historic District. Now you notice that it's where the area where it is, it kind of butts right up to the Gregory Tract, which is to the north. And then there's Linden. There are other historic districts that bound right up there. They all in some way are connected with Ellwanger and Berry, but they all developed at different times. So each one of these historic districts has what we call a period of significance, and each one is slightly different. So that's why we have these 3 historic districts. But again, you know, if you are in this historic district, if you have a contributing building, which means it's historic, then you can probably qualify for the homeowner tax credit. Notice I say probably because I don't want to say things that are or promise anything that I can't live up to. Okay. So that's the Ellwanger and Berry Highland Park Historic District, Mount Hope Highland, and Azalea. So for these, again, like I said, you're going to be getting these weird letters. So next slide. Now, if you think that this is the best thing since sliced bread, that's great. You know, you can send in a letter saying, I really support this historic district. But if you don't, you can also send in a letter. In the past, we required that the letters be notarized. Now we don't. But if you see the statement in white there, that has to be in the letter, okay, or it will not be accepted by the National Park Service. So if you want to support it, we'll take the letter. You send it to Daniel McKay. If you don't like the district, and remember, you're not what you are, I don't want to say protest, but it's called a letter of objection. If you're not objecting to your house being listed on the National Register, you're objecting to the district being listed on the National Register. So I want to make that very clear. Okay. Next slide. And here's the contact information. I'm the person to talk to if you have any questions about the National Register. There's my phone number. There is my email address. I'm easier to get a hold of by email than by the phone. If you have any questions, let's say you own a commercial building and you're thinking, well, maybe I'll look into that commercial tax credit. If you have questions about what you can and cannot do to the building, the person to talk to is Robin Sedgwick. Christina is our point person for Monroe County for the homeowner tax credit, and there's her contact information. And if you're one of the lucky people to have a barn on your property or know of someone who has a barn on their property built before 1946, needs some work done, the person on the barn tax credit program is Olivia Brzee, and there is her contact information as well. And if you forget who to talk to, you just call our general office number and say, I live in Monroe County, I live in Rochester, and I have a question about whatever. It'll probably come to me, but I'll get you to the right person. So no matter what. So I've got one more slide with some more information, and this is where you can find general information about all the programs that I've talked to you about tonight. You can find information at parks.ny.gov//SHPO. If you are interested in the federal tax credit program, I recommend the NPS website. Okay. If you're trying to look up information about your house or any of these districts, you can try our chris.parks.ny.gov. I think I have the tax credit program down here twice. Okay. Yeah, I have to fix that. But anyway, okay. If you're totally confused about this slide and say, I want information about the homeowner tax credit, where do I go? Call our general number. We'll get you to the right place, but it should be at parks.ny.gov. You have to put in the / and the SHPO, because we are part of an agency that does everything from camping and boat rental and all that kind of stuff. So if you want to skip all of that outdoor, parks and things like that, and go right to this to the information that you're looking for, put in the / and the SHPO, and that'll get you to our page. Okay, that's all I have.
Hello.
Hello.
All right, I'm just going to stop sharing here, and Christina, I'll let you begin sharing your screen if you would like. And I think I mentioned this at the very beginning, but just want everyone to know we will do a question and answer about everything that Virginia just spoke about and everything Christina's going to talk about now. Because there's quite a few people, you're welcome to pop your questions into the chat on here, and we'll read out your questions at the end. But we can also have you come on and actually ask your questions as well. So we will do a question and answer at the end. And also, as Virginia said, well, you can reach out to their general number at the State Preservation Office if you're not sure where to go. You can also always reach out to us at the Landmark Society, and we can help you get to where you need to be as well. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Christina.
You're seeing the correct version, right? Not the presenter one? God, yes, finally. Hi. I'm Christina Vagvolgi. I'm part of the incentives and planning unit, and one of those incentives that I'm here to talk to you about tonight is the historic homeownership rehabilitation credit. It's a great program. I love to tell people about it, and now once you guys are listed, you'll be available. So what this is it's a program that allows you to earn a New York State income tax credit. It's 20% of your qualified rehabilitation expenses. And the way it works, it's not a deduction. it's a credit. So whatever it is, when you're doing your taxes, if you owe the state of New York a certain amount and you've accumulated this credit, it takes it off what you owe the state of New York. If your income is $60,000 or below your adjusted gross income, if the credit exceeds what you owe, it can actually be refunded to you. If you're above that income threshold, it just carries over into subsequent tax years, so you don't lose out on it. That's essentially how it works. It is only for New York State taxpayers. So you have to like file a tax return. Sometimes people are retired and they don't owe anything, so they don't file tax returns. The only way to take advantage of this credit is to actually file a tax return and get it that way. Like Virginia said, the buildings have to be listed on the state or national register of historic places. We can also have the credit is allowed in certified local districts. That doesn't really apply to any of you, but sometimes there are locally certified districts that are approved by the National Park Service for the tax credit purposes that aren't formally listed on the National Register. Qualifying census tract is another criteria, and that's the entire city of Rochester qualifies, so no worries there. In order to qualify for the tax credit, you need to spend at least $5,000 on all of the work that you do. It's not each work item needs to be $5,000. It's the total of all your work needs to be at least $5,000, and 5% of your work has to be on the exterior. You can't get more than $50,000 of credit in a single tax year. So if you have a huge, massive project and you're spending more than $250,000, you're going to max out that credit, but you can do it year after year. So if you've got $1 million project, then try and phase it out over a few years, I guess. I hope you don't have to do $1 million of work though. There is an application. So the credit is based on a state tax law. Technically, they make all the rules and the laws. We administer the application process because part of the tax law dictates that our office needs to review the work prior to the start to make sure that it, is appropriate for your historic home. So there's a 3-part application. Part 1 and 2 are basically together on the same form. You're supposed to submit that before you start the work. We review it and let you know that it's okay to start. Usually you're not supposed to be able to apply unless you are listed. We need to make that certification. When we know that districts are moving forward, such as these ones, we've allowed people to start applying before it's formally listed because we know what's going to happen. You just won't be able to actually file for the credit until that listing is official. There are review fees associated with it. The part 2 fee is only $25. And then the final part 3 fee it's a sliding scale depending on what your total project cost is. You would never owe more than $475 for the part 3 fee. That's like the most expensive end of project expenses. You can apply for the credit year after year. You claim it in the year that you finish out and submit your part 3, and we provide you with your end of the project certification. Some people come in every year and they start one at the beginning of the year and close it out and then file it on their taxes. Sometimes projects stay open for multiple years and you're just, pushing through and you just claim a larger credit, but it goes on the year in which you get your final certification. There is a lot of work that qualifies. It's not just like restoration of historic features type work. It's a lot of regular stuff you'd be doing to your home, repairing your roof, replacing your roof, painting, putting gutters on your house, repairing your stoop. Ask me if you're not sure, call me and I'll tell you if it qualifies. We also have an appendix on the application, but repairing windows, even replacing windows, if they're appropriate windows, we allow it under the program, just not vinyl. Please don't ask me if you can put in vinyl windows. Lots of stuff on your home's interior, putting in a new kitchen, cabinets, countertops, flooring, tile, backsplashes, lighting fixtures, plumbing fixtures. It all qualifies and you'll get a 20% tax credit on that work. Even installing solar panels qualifies for the program. They have to be, the rule of thumb is generally not visible from the public right of way, but there are ways to do it. There are other incentive programs associated with solar panels that you're allowed to take advantage of as well. they can be placed, like if you have a garage that's not attached to your house, you can put the solar panels on your garage and get the tax credit for it. So then we don't even have to worry about, if they're on the front of the house. There are types of work that don't qualify for the program. Landscaping, fencing, basically anything that's not within the footprint of your home, or, and attached to the house, detached outbuildings like garages and carriage houses, anything that increases the square footage of the home. So you can't, put an addition, you might be allowed to put an addition, but you can't get the tax credit for it. And then work that does not meet the Secretary of the Interior standards. That's, the guidelines that we use to determine whether or not work is appropriate. So the Secretary of the Interior standards, you can look them up. They're, developed by the Secretary of the Interior and the National Park Service. The basic tenets of it are retaining historic material as best that you can, repairing it, in kind, or if you have to replace it, it has to be, in either the same material or an appropriate replacement material. And I feel like, I think people would be surprised at how flexible we can be when it comes to replacement materials. With windows, really, vinyl is a hard no, but there are other aluminum and composite materials that we allow that can sometimes be a little bit better than some new wood windows, and they're allowed under the program. Retaining historic features. There's things that we're not going to let you replace. We're gonna be harder on you to repair them in kind, or in place. Things like very distinctive railings, wrought iron doors. A lot of times people have stained glass windows in their homes. We wouldn't want to see those. You can put in a storm window over it, but we wouldn't want to see you taking out some of those character defining features of your historic home. We don't scrutinize interiors as much under this program, but there's some things that are obviously important. Historic staircases, we wouldn't want to see someone rip that out. A lot of people want open floor plans, and in some cases that can be okay. But if you had like an old, row house and you just gutted the whole thing to make it open, we would not really be too happy about that. But when you have upstairs rooms, there's more flexibility there. So sometimes people combine 2 rooms to make a master suite in the upstairs. We don't care so much about that, but it's those primary rooms that the guests would see in your home historically. We wouldn't want to have you rip out your parlor or your dining room walls just to modernize things. Repairing is important. There's, a lot of historic windows can be repaired. We don't push too hard. We understand that people need to live in their homes and that old windows can be a problem. But if you come to me with an application that says you want to repair your historic windows, you'll be my favorite applicant until the next window restoration person comes along, because we love to see that. But we do understand, that's not always possible. But there are, some treatments like, pressure washing and sandblasting and insensitive repointing that we see a lot, that there are ways to repair things that are not okay, and there are things that are okay. And a lot of times we can provide guidance. There are a lot of preservation briefs that are provided by the National Park Service that we often guide people to, just to make sure they're doing things the right way and the best way. Like I said, if there's the need for replacement, we can be flexible. When things are deteriorated beyond repair, we understand, you need to go in a different direction. Even sometimes, like with slate roofs, we understand on people's homes, replacing a slate roof can be cost prohibitive for the average homeowner. There are synthetic slate products that we would accept, if it's appropriate and it's appropriate match to what was there historically, it's something that we can consider, and we'll work with you on that. So the best thing in that case is to, get in touch with us ahead of time and say, hey, have you approved this material before? Is this going to be okay? and we'll work with you on that. But one thing to keep in mind is wood siding. We wouldn't ever want to see new siding materials that have fake wood grain, because that's not something that you would have seen historically on wood siding. But there are a lot of fine materials out there that are substitute materials that we would accept, but we can't recommend manufacturers. But you can call the Landmark Society about that. I was kind of mentioning this program doesn't expect you to like go back in time. It doesn't mean you have to keep your 50s kitchen the way that it was in the 50s. There's, especially with kitchens and bathrooms, there's a lot of flexibility for you to be able to pretty much do whatever you want in those spaces. If you're changing window openings, you're going to want to talk to us about that. And there's even a little bit of flexibility there if it's on the back of your home. But in general, I feel like this is where people benefit sometimes the most from this program, is being able to put in a new kitchen or a new bathroom that's much needed in their older homes. So we really try to work with people on that. The program can be used, it's primarily, as Virginia mentioned before, for owner-occupied residences. It's okay if you have a duplex home, or even if you have, there's a question on the application that asks, is there an income producing component? So maybe you have a home office that you claim on your taxes. That's okay. We just figure things a little differently. So if you have a two-family home and you live in the upstairs, any work that you do on the inside of your living unit, you get to claim the full cost of that work. You can't claim any of the cost of the work inside the rental unit, because that doesn't benefit your home. And then anything on the outside, on the exterior, and any shared spaces, you just have to factor it by the percentage of the home that you live in. So if it's an easy 50-50, if you put on a new roof, you can only claim 50% of the cost of the new roof on your home ownership side of the tax credit. So, but there is that flexibility there, even when there's the income producing components. The whole application has been made available online. For anyone who's more analog and would rather fill out the form, it's available that way too. We're always still going to allow people to fill out the form. The problem with the hard copies is it has to have your original signature. So if you're filling out the hard copy form, you have to print it out and sign it with your hand and mail it to us that way, and send us some photos on, a CD or a flash drive. But we have made it available. You can do the whole thing online. It allows you to submit your payment information, to upload your photos, and to provide a secure signature. So that is great. Those links are all on our website, and there's guidance for those and instructions for submitting online. And also, if you have any questions, like I spend time occasionally walking people through submitting the online application. Like, we are here to help. We're here to answer questions. So, it's made things a lot easier, and it's reduced the amount of paper we have to deal with in our office too. One of the most important parts of the application form is describing the work that you're going to do. So you'll see there's a worksheet component to it, and asks you, what is the proposed work? What is the existing condition? What are you proposing to do? And what's the estimated cost? It's important when you're filling out this part of the form to describe to us what the materials of the things are. So don't just say worn out roof, replacing the roof. What's the material of the roof? It's an asphalt shingle roof. We're going to replace it with a new asphalt shingle roof. This is how much we think it's going to cost. You don't have to have estimates from a contractor to be able to apply. The estimated cost can be your approximation of what you think it's going to cost. Oftentimes the costs end up changing from the time you submit your part 1 and 2 to the actual costs. So it's okay if you just think, oh, I think the roof's going to be $15,000 and it ends up being $16,000. We're not going to, hold that against you. It's just that when you put in your final application with your expenditures, you have to document those costs, make sure those are correct to what you actually spent. And the photos are also an important part of the application. We always ask for some exterior photos of all sides of the visible outside of your home, just because we like to keep updating our project or our database of buildings, basically. And that's a great way for us to update that. So always some outside photos, and then photos of all the areas where you plan to do the work. I rely, when I'm doing these reviews, on looking at the before and after photos to make sure that you did what you said you were going to do in the way that we approved it. So if you're replacing your boiler, take a picture of your crusty old boiler, and then you're going to, at the end, you're going to send me a picture of your new boiler. You know, if you're repainting your dining room, send a few pictures of that. You don't need to take pictures of every square inch of your home. I did have someone once send me a picture of every electrical outlet that they were going to replace, and I felt horrible that they had spent so much time photographing all of their electrical outlets. So it doesn't need to be that detailed, but just put yourself in my shoes, that I need to be able to understand what you're doing, what it looks like now, and then what it looks like when it's done. Also, once you've put in your initial application, you'll get your stuff back from us. You'll have a project number, you'll have your reviewer's contact information. If at any time you want to add more work to your project, or if something that you said you're going to do is changing, like if you thought you were going to be repairing your roof, it turns out you have to replace it, you can send in an amendment for that. Or if you say, oh, you know what, I'm going to do that half bath downstairs, I want to add that to my project, you can submit an amendment form. Those are also available online. There's no cost to submit an amendment form. And so you can always add things to your project. I think the record is 9 amendments on one application. So we're happy to take those and add those to your project file. So once you've applied, you put in your application, we've approved it, you can go ahead and start your work. Make sure you read through your form once you get it back to make sure, like, we didn't put any special conditions or make notes of maybe you included your walkway and that's not a qualifying expense. We'll make a note of that on our project review, and you'll have that in your documentation. It's always important to keep those forms and those approvals for your records. There's a project number that'll be assigned that you'll need to refer to for any amendments or for your part 3. So you want to keep that handy, but if you lose it, we always have a copy, so you could ask us for it. If you have any questions about, during the progress of your work, you can always reach out and contact us. The part 3 application is fairly easy. There's a worksheet that's similar to what you fill out in the part 1 and 2, where you're going to say, this was the work item, this is what I did, these were the final costs. You want to report all the true and accurate costs, but you don't need to send us your invoices or your receipts. All of that you want to retain for your records. If anyone's going to question, we're going to believe you when you tell us how much you spent. If anyone ever questions it, it's going to be tax and finance after you've submitted your tax claim. So keep all of that for your records. You don't need to send it to us. One thing I think I forgot to mention was another thing that doesn't qualify is work that you do yourself. If you're painting your own dining room, you can claim the cost of the paint, but you can't claim the cost of your own labor because there's no way for us to quantify that. If you want to claim the credit in any given tax year, we need to receive your part 3 application no later than December 31st. It says in a lot of the guidance documents, we strongly suggest you get it to us by December 1st, because we get a lot of these at the end of the year. We get a lot of these on December 31st. And as long as we've received it by then, we will do our best to issue you a certification to use in that tax year's taxes. But just keep in mind, we do get a lot of these at the end of the year. So if you finish up your project in August and you're not going to do any more work, just fill it out and get it over with. And then you won't have to worry about it, and we won't be quite as buried at the end of the year. There are some things that we would deny the work that doesn't meet the standards. This is a really good example of, someone who just stripped off all the historic features and put vinyl siding on their beautiful porch. That's not something we would approve. It does not meet the standards. Inappropriate replacement materials, like I said before, we don't allow vinyl windows. If you already have vinyl windows, that's a different story. But if you're taking out your wood windows and putting in vinyl windows, we wouldn't allow that. We certainly don't cover vinyl siding. I'm trying to think, there's lots of examples, but we don't often end up denying projects. A lot of times, even if something comes to us and we say, ooh, this is not what we would approve, we won't just stamp denied on your application and send it back to you. Someone will reach out to you and say, have you thought about doing this differently? So we're happy to work with you on that. And I'm happy to take any questions. I think that's everything. Should I look in the chat?
A number of questions in the chat.
Yeah, I can read some of those. I'm just trying to figure out how there we go, pull everybody up again. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and read questions from the chat first, and then when we're done with that, if anyone else has additional questions, we can go from there. But let me see here. Here we go. Okay, let me get to the top. So the first question is, will deeds now carry reference to these designations? No, so this won't go into your deed. It really has nothing to do with the deed or sale of your property necessarily. It is just the National Register designation is an honorary designation. So the one thing I want to make sure you know too is that the National Register listing won't place any restrictions on private property owners with what you can and can't do with your property. The only time a review would kick in from the state or federal agencies would be if you're doing a project on your property that includes state or federal funding or permitting, or you choose to use the tax credit program that Christina just went through. That's when you'll get a review from the state. Otherwise, being listed in the National Register does not place restrictions on what you can and can't do with your home. All right, but
If I can just add one thing.
Sure.
There are no restrictions with regard to the SHPO piece of this. If your property has already been designated as a property that has historic significance by the city of Rochester, or is in a city of Rochester preservation district, then you'll need to go through the regular permitting process with the preservation board.
Correct. And I believe all three of the districts we're talking about right now are not city of Rochester preservation districts. So you don't have to worry about working with them. But if you own a property that's in one of their preservation districts, that's when that would kick in. Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, and if you're not sure about the preservation districts, they are online. The one that I know of offhand that is a local preservation district is East Avenue Historic District. But as Megan said, for the three that we're working with today, they are not locally designated preservation districts.
Right.
But there are a few buildings that have been designated buildings of historic significance. Just
yes.
Individual buildings within this area.
Correct. And if you're not sure if that's you, feel free to reach out to me. I can send you the list of what is individually designated by the city. If you're a residential property owner within like the Ellwanger and Berry or the Azalea district, probably not going to be you. But if you have a highly significant building, then yes. So, you know, if you're not sure, reach out to me and I can get you that information too. Let's see the next question. So with Highland Park being a historic park, does that have any influence on activities that happen within the park, such as the Lilac Festival and alcohol being sold in the park? So I can answer this one. No, it doesn't. So being listed in the National Register, again, doesn't place any restrictions. So all of those types of things, like what kind of activities happen in the park, whether alcohol can be sold, you know, those sorts of things, what events are going on, that is all, I believe Highland Park is county park. So that would all be up to the county and maybe city if they have say to, but it doesn't have anything to do with the National Register.
Yeah, and that question, I understand why it's being asked because of what happened at the Lilac Festival recently, which was not good. But what I need to point out is there's what is happening on the local level, there's what's happening on the state and federal level. And the listings of these districts are on the state and federal level. So we cannot go into the city or the county and say, you cannot sell alcohol at Highland Park. We're not allowed to do that. It's not our jurisdiction. If it were a state park, we could do that, but not with Highland Park.
Right. So the next question may have been typed in before you got to this, Christina, but it's what type of work qualifies? Awning, painting, landscaping? I think you kind of covered landscaping is no, painting is yes. What about awnings?
It has to be things that are permanently installed. So I didn't give my permanently installed, pick it up and shake it analogy that I usually say. Appliances that you could take with you when you leave aren't covered. So if you think about if you took your house and you pick it up and shook it, anything that doesn't come loose qualifies except kitchen appliances like stoves, refrigerators, things like that don't qualify, but anything that is generally like permanently installed would qualify. So if it's an awning that's like a structural awning, I would think that yes, that could qualify, but window treatments in general, like curtains and things like that, don't qualify. So
Right, but the awnings came on the house originally, historically, and
like they're those little aluminum awnings over your windows. Yes.
no, they're canvas awnings. They
Oh.
came. In fact, I had them put on a Buffalo company put them on. They were identical to what had rotted off our house. They were original to the house. So there you go.
That's a tickler because if it's is that a window treatment or is that a permanently installed thing? I'd have to get back to you on that if you if you need to know, because
Pretty permanent. You're supposed to take them
right.
down.
You're not supposed to take them off.
I'm too lazy.
I think I might allow it.
You can take them off to preserve them, but I don't.
I see the next question already. There was a mention of rental properties. Would this include single family homes which are a rental? No, it has to, because this program is only for owner occupied residences. So if you own a single family home and you rent it out to someone else, that is an income producing property. So that property does not qualify for this program. You have to live in the home. This makes me also remember to mention there is a recapture period for the credit. So there's a 2-year recapture period. If you sell the home or you no longer reside in the home within 2 years of when you claimed the credit, you may be subject to recapture. It has to do when you do a calculation by the number of months and whatnot, and you may owe the state back some of that money you took as a credit. There is a way, if you happen to have a historic home and you're doing a bunch of work to it this year, and then before you claim the credit next year, you decide to sell the house, you can pass the credit on to the person that you are selling the house to. So essentially, you go through all the steps of the application, you get the work approved, you do the work, you obtain the certificate of completion, and then you don't file the credit. But if you're selling the home, you can pass that credit. So I had someone, he was like, I'm selling the house and hey, you're going to get a $4,000 tax credit to sweeten the deal. So it can work that way, but you can't get the credit on a home that you don't live in.
But for rental properties, especially if it's going to be a substantial renovation or rehabilitation to the property, it's an income producing property. You should look into the federal commercial tax credit program. Like I said, they require a substantial rehabilitation because they don't want things to come in and, we'll do a roof this year and then we'll do the outside. No, that's not how the federal program works. It's got to be worth their while, let's put it this way, to go through all the reviews, and it's got to be worth your while too.
But it's not, it's not necessarily about that. That also the substantial rehabilitation has to do with the IRS code for that program. And it really has to do with the amount of money you spend. And there's this whole equation that you have to get to. It's based on what you paid for your home, subtracting the value of the land, factoring in depreciation and capital improvements, and whatever you get to, that's your adjusted basis, and you have to spend at least that much. So
Right.
If it's a home that you haven't owned for very long and you paid a lot for it, you would have to be doing a lot of work to it to be able to take advantage of that program. But if it's your parents' house that you have owned for a long time and it needs a ton of work, then call Robin and ask her about it, because it might be able to work.
Or go to the National Park Service website. The formula for the substantial rehabilitation is right on their website. And you can do the mathematics right there. I don't try and tell people what that is because I'm mathematically impaired. So it's best to go to the source.
And I would kind of jump on the tail of that and say, if you have specific tax questions about whether it's the federal commercial program they're talking about or the historic homeownership tax credit that Christina just presented on, neither the people at SHPO nor us at the Landmark Society are tax professionals. So generally we can't legally or otherwise answer your tax questions. If you do have those, you can always get in touch with me and ask. And my response may be that you need to talk to your tax attorney, your tax accountant. And that really comes down to how it works for you, or on the commercial end, whether or not you can make that work. That would be something to ask them. Our expertise is more on the end of whether or not your projects will meet the standards, the preservation standards. So just be aware of that too. Okay, so the next question is, once designations are in place, what building permit processes are impacted even if homeowner isn't seeking tax credits or grants? You want me to take that one? Once this designation is in place, again, like I mentioned, it's an honorary designation, so it won't have any restrictions on what you can and can't do. There won't be any special permitting processes you have to go through. Again, like Bob said, unless you are one of those individually landmarked properties from the city of Rochester, which is not going to be the majority of these districts. But otherwise, there aren't any special permitting processes. You would still have to go through the city to get the proper permits if you're doing work that you generally would have to, but there are no additional ones because of being listed. Even if you're not seeking, so whether or not you seek tax credits. And again, the tax credit program that Christina and Virginia are talking about is a voluntary tax credit program. You don't have to participate in it. It's completely up to you. It's just a benefit of being listed.
No, but if you are in a historic district and let's say you get a HUD grant to do work on your house, like lead remediation, that will have to come to us for review. And what I will let our Robin Sedgwick in our technical unit know that this house is listed on the blah, blah, blah historic district. And then they will contact, she will work with the person submitting the request for the review to say, okay, we want to make sure that this building has its lead problem taken care of, but we also want to make sure that it retains its historic characteristics. So she works with them to make sure that that happens. So you get your lead-free house and you maintain your historic house.
Right.
But those are the only times that we can step in if it involves state or federal funding, like a HUD grant, or state or federal permitting, like let's say you're doing something and you need a Department of Health grant, then that has to come to us for review. And normally it should be by the granting the agency that is giving you the grant, like the DEC or DOH. They should send those things to us. But every once in a while, one of them says, well, you need to talk to SHPO. Talk to us. We'll get it done for you.
All right, and this question says, does this mean that you can't get the credit if you don't follow these rules, or do the rules need to be followed regardless?
I don't know what the regardless means, but yes, you cannot get the credit if you don't follow my rules. No, yes, the work needs to be appropriate. You need to follow the program guidelines. We don't set these, we didn't make all of these rules. The rules are part of the tax law.
No,
So
that was my question. I was just wondering, is this effectively like an HOA where you control what I can do and can't do on my property? But
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, you don't. I won't ever look at anything you're doing unless you want to get a tax credit. And then in which case you would need to send it through us. But we also don't scrutinize things on the level that some local reviews do. We don't dictate what kind of mailbox you can have or what color you can paint your house. You can paint your house hot pink for all I care. I'm not going to tell you no. There's no accounting for your own personal taste. So if you are, I'm just happy that there'll be a new layer of paint to protect your old house. I don't care what color you paint it. So there's oftentimes confusion between like, oh, if we're in a historic district, they're going to come in and tell me I can't do this, that, and the next thing. We don't proactively police you, and we don't scrutinize things on the same level necessarily that some local reviews would do. I'm sorry, I see the next question now, and I didn't mention this. Typically, the reviews take 30 days. It's like our policy, we'll get this to you in 30 days. They usually honestly take less time with that, especially if you do the online application, because everything just zips to us so quickly. It usually doesn't take us more than a couple of weeks. If you have work that you need to get started right away, we know how hard it is to get contractors these days. If you fill out your application and then your plumber calls you and say, hey, I can actually be there tomorrow, call me or email me and say, hey, is this going to be okay? And I can look at it quickly and say, yeah, I'm not going to be able to process all your paperwork, but go right ahead and start. Another thing I forgot to mention was, I think it said it in the slides, but I didn't say it out loud. The work has to be pre-approved, which means we don't approve things retroactively. We can't go back and say, I did my kitchen 2 years ago. Can I get the tax credit? Unfortunately, no. But if a tree fell on your house 2 months ago and you had to fix your roof and you're in this district, please call me and we will figure this out, because most likely you repaired your house appropriately. And, you know, so even though the tax law says it has to be approved prior to the start of work, there are some exceptions with like emergency repairs and things like that, that we can use our discretion with.
I think the next question is
I'm sorry.
also for you, Christina. This one says, if you do some work that is covered, does that prohibit you from doing other work that is not? For example, you do a bathroom remodel, which is qualified, and then you vinyl side your house, which is unqualified. So I think the question is, can you still get the tax credit if you do some work that doesn't meet the standards?
It depends on what that work is. And this example that was made is the example that would throw the baby out with the bathwater. So vinyl siding is one of those things that we consider to be like bad enough that it would sink the whole project, because everyone in the neighborhood is going to see that you put that vinyl siding on your house. We and the Park Service do not consider vinyl siding to be an appropriate replacement material, an appropriate treatment. So in that case, that's something that we would say we can't approve any part of this work, because you've done something that has like crossed the line of it's not meeting the standards, and we can't endorse any part of the project. Another thing would be like putting solar panels right on the front of your house. I understand people with roofs that slope to the south, that's the only place where it's worthwhile. We would not approve that. And if you insisted on doing it, we wouldn't be able to approve any part of your project. But if you have, I'm trying to think of like something that wouldn't qualify. Like sometimes people put vinyl bathroom windows in because of the moisture. Sometimes people are replacing, you know, windows on a non-historic porch on the back of their house, and they put vinyl windows. Well, we would just say, we're not going to let you take the credit for that, but the rest of your work is fine. So there are cases when that can happen, but vinyl siding was just a bad example, because that's a case where we wouldn't allow any of it if you insisted on putting vinyl siding. Sorry.
Let's see. I'm not sure the next question may have been linked to that, because it said, if you're getting a New York State tax return, does this still work?
You mean if you don't owe anything? Is that the question?
Oh, yes. I think that, Eric, if you want to unmute and explain, you're welcome to, just so that we don't assume what you're asking.
Yeah, basically, that was my question. If you were getting a tax return, does it just increase your tax return?
You can only have it refunded to you if your income, New York adjusted gross income, is $60,000 or below. So if you're above that income threshold and you don't owe anything in taxes, you're just going to have a tax credit that's going to keep rolling forward forever until you do owe something in taxes. So there's like this really tiny subset of people who don't owe anything, but their income is above $60,000. So like I have pointed this out many times in there, whenever they're redoing the tax legislation, I'm like, there's people, and it's a lot of times it's retired people who maybe your retirement income is still taxable income, but you don't ever end up owing anything. And it's a weird situation, but it only becomes refundable if your adjusted gross income is $60,000 or below.
Okay, and then based on that question before that, my question is, if you submitted that as two separate projects with two separate contractors, like the bathroom is one project, and you get your house vinyl sided as a separate, completely separate project?
Why would you ever tell me about the vinyl siding? Just,
No, that's
I'm
what I'm
not saying don't tell me about it,
Yeah,
but
no,
if I don't know, I can't come to your house and tell you not to do it.
yeah,
I-
yeah. So
I
I'm-
wish I
I
had
would-
just said that, but like, if you just submitted the bathroom project, I would be ignorant of the fact that you're putting vinyl siding on.
yeah, that's what I was wondering. Thank you.
But please don't put vinyl siding.
Eric,
Well, then I have other questions about what I can do with my house, because I have cedar shingles on the top section of my house that are in bad shape. So I need options. So
There are composite shingles that we would allow that are have a much longer lifespan and are much lower maintenance than regular shingles. I cannot endorse manufacturers, but you can certainly Google some and send them to me and say, is this acceptable? But I can't say, oh, this is a product that you should use, because as state employees, we're not allowed to do that.
I gotcha.
Eric, I'd like to step back to your question regarding New York State tax return, just to clarify it a little bit. When you were saying if you're getting a New York State tax return, I think it's important to know that it's if you're paying any New York State taxes. If you're getting a return because you overpaid during the year, certainly you can take the credit
Mhm.
and utilize it for that. If
Okay.
you don't owe anything on any of the income that you're making in New York State, even if it's over 60,000, then you wouldn't be able to take the credit that year. But is my understanding correct, Christina, that you can carry that forward to the next year if you have?
Yes, it carries forward. I think I would have to read the tax law, but it carries forward, I think, until it is used up, is the language in the tax law. Exterior 5%.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. If you want to call me or email me if you have some more specific questions about your house, I'm happy to talk to you about your work you want to do on your house. The
Yes,
5% exterior would have, if you're doing your kitchen, a window is considered exterior, windows, doors, porches, anything. It's was written into the tax law to encourage people to do improvements to the exterior of their home, so that it's benefiting everyone and people can see that you're beautifying your historic home. I personally wish that they would make the 5% exterior requirement go away, because it's really unnecessary and it's annoying for me to have to do the calculations to make sure you have 5% exterior work, but we will check it. But here's the thing, you could apply if all you want to do right now is your kitchen or your bathroom and you're not touching any exterior walls or window openings, you can still apply for that and we'll keep your project open. We won't close your project. In the tax law, it doesn't say you have X many years to complete your project. So if you're doing your kitchen this year and you do it all, you just can't claim the credit, but the amount of credit that you've earned remains. And then in the future, you can always add exterior work. So, okay, you have to fix your front stoop and it's a couple $100. There you go. You have to replace your storm door. That counts. So you can always get to that exterior 5% later. We get a lot of applications that come without exterior work and we just make a note. Just please note, you got to add some exterior work before you'll meet the program requirements.
So the next question is, when does the program start for us? You can start applying for the tax credit now. SHPO has the draft nominations that are being prepared to go to the State Review Board. So you can start submitting your Part 1 and Part 2 applications now. And then
the question more.
Right, and like I said before, since this is the homeowner program is a state program, the building, in order to take the credit for this year, the historic district will have to be listed on the state register. And that usually happens right when we have our board meetings, our New York State Board for Historic Preservation meetings that approve all of the nominations. When they approve it, it's on the state register. And like I said, that is targeted for September. So if you're thinking of doing something right now, this summer, this is, the time of the year to get these projects done. Go ahead and submit an application and just, like I said, we're pretty confident that the board is going to pass these nominations, and then they will be on the state register.
Within this calendar year.
I didn't catch that.
Oh, within this calendar year, so we could expect to get a refund in 2024.
The tax credit, you'd be able to use the tax credit when you file. Right now, the expectation is that this should be and will be listed in the state register as of September.
First week of
the September board meeting. So at that point, you could do this, and if you have your Part 3 certified, like Christina said, but at the end of the year, then you would be able to claim this tax credit for any work you're doing now moving forward on your 2023 taxes that you submit in April.
Good, thank you.
Yes. Let's see. Someone asked if we put vinyl windows on a few years ago, does that disqualify us for any future work?
No, it's basically like you're still getting the windows are there at the time that you got listed. So we're not going to hold it against you. If you want to take those vinyl windows out and put in better windows, it's totally fine. Yeah, honey, hold on. So no, that doesn't disqualify. And sometimes there are houses that have vinyl siding on them and they've been listed, and if you need to repair your vinyl siding, it's already there. That's something we would allow. But if you took that vinyl siding off, we wouldn't want you to put new vinyl siding on.
Right. So basically, if your house already has vinyl siding or vinyl windows, or even some minor alterations, we're still putting through your property. Most likely, there's very few properties that are going into these districts being called non-contributing, which means you're not being considered historic within these districts. For the most part, the great majority of properties in these districts are contributing. And that's whether you already have vinyl siding and vinyl windows, whether a porch has been enclosed, or maybe your roof was replaced. It doesn't disqualify you from being listed in the register with the historic district. And it doesn't disqualify you from being able to use the tax credit program then. So basically, if you already have it, it is the existing condition. Let's see, does it matter if my spouse and I file taxes separately or jointly? Does that impact the $60,000 income limit? Does it impact which one of us fills out the application and pays for the work? I think, Christine, unless you think otherwise, I would say this is one of those questions for your tax accountant or your tax attorney. It's not something we can give you a whole lot of advice on.
What I will say is, if you don't feel like paying your tax attorney, the tax claim form, oh, I should have said this too. So the process is you come through me, you get your Part 3 certification. There's a tax claim form that you use when you're filing your taxes. That's how you actually claim the credit. Once you've gotten your certification from me, I'm going to certify, yes, I certify that you have $50,000 in qualified rehabilitation expenses. And then you take that and you fill out tax claim form IT 237. That is the New York State tax claim form. There are some very extensive and informative instructions. There's a whole instruction sheet for IT 237, and it does have a section about filing jointly and the $60,000 thing. So I don't know that stuff well enough to explain it, but if you just go online and look up IT 237 instructions, you can find the information that should probably answer that question.
All right. That is the end of the questions I see here. Since it's already almost 20 after 8, we don't want to keep everybody all night long. So what I'm going to do is, if you have any other questions beyond this, or you come up with questions later, you feel free to reach out to Virginia or Christina, but you can always email me. My email address is mklem, K-L-E-M, at landmarksociety.org, or just reach out to the Landmark Society. We're right in your neighborhood. We're located at Warner Castle. Although we're not open to the public, we are certainly there to answer questions right now. So please reach out to us if you have questions about how any of this works, whether it's the National Register or the tax credits, and we will make sure we get you the answers you need. You can also contact me if you're not quite sure what to do with the tax credit application or need some help. We have a program at Landmark Society that we can kind of come alongside you and assist with that process. So we're here to help. If you're not sure how to reach out to us, reach out to your Highland Park Neighborhood Association. Bob is the chair of that, and he will get you in touch with us as well. and we'll get all of your questions answered. But for now, I will say thank you all so much for attending this meeting. I know there's a lot of information, but we're very excited that these 3 nominations are finally moving forward. Again, in September, probably first week of September, these should be listed in the state register, and from there they'll move on to the national register. And in the meantime, please feel free to start applying for the tax credit program if you would like to use that. All right, thank you all so much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. It was excellent.
Thank you.